Not sure how weird this is, but I look forward to Christmas as soon as the new year dawns. To some, I guess it would seem sad, but I loved all my family coming together and seeing everyone smiling and happy. It's like we had survived the year, and for a small moment we can truly be happy. Or at least that's my take on it. When Christmas did roll around though, I was falling short on gifts. It was very unlike me, especially with work and other commitments I was lacking. Most evenings, I would head out in the car and get surrounded by other late purchasers who were also looking for great gifts. Sometimes I got lucky and found what I wanted, and other times I just hadn't. It was to be expected, really. What's horrible though is when you can see something is the last they have in stock and watching others fight over it. A few days before Christmas Eve though, I was one gift short and had a call from my mate who had spoke of a guy selling perfume, which was what I wanted. He of course sold other fragrances, but he apparently had the one I wanted. So I asked for the address and got myself ready whilst my family asked me numerous times where I was going so late at night. It wasn't that late. It was around 9 p.m. But winter always became dark very early, so I think they just worried. I told them I'm going to see a friend for a second and headed out the door. I had never experienced a white Christmas before, but tonight it was snowing, and it was snowing heavily. The gritter had been out, and the snowplow had pushed the snow out of the way, and I watched as others drove around quite slowly. Everyone was in the Christmas spirit, and I will be soon enough, once I got this perfume. I hopped in the car when my phone buzzed, and it was my friend telling me that the guy wants to meet out in public, as it was safer. I was happy with that. Apparently, they wanted to meet out in a nearby car parking lot. It was a shopping centre, but an old one that had been closed down a few years ago to make headway for a new one, not much further away. The drive was going to take me around an hour, especially with driving more carefully than usual. The car took ages to warm up, and listening to the radio, I was pretty chilled. I arrived just under an hour and pulled up in the car park, parking very terribly, admittedly, and waited. A few minutes later, another car pulls up, and this was it. My first and hopefully last time doing a purchase in this way. I actually felt quite excited, but nervous. I expected us to get out of the car, but we hadn't. He pulled up to my window, rolled down his, and I copied as we literally exchanged that way. He looked rough, tired, but otherwise normal. He seemed friendly. We spoke about the perfume as I wanted to make sure it wasn't some knockoff I was paying full price for. He checked it over to me, but it was sealed and I didn't want to open it as it was a gift, so I just believed him. I handed over the money and that was it. He drove off and I followed suit shortly after. I was happy. I had finally finished all my shopping and that went better than expected. Happy I found myself back on the road and back driving home when I had stupidly decided to take a different way home. I had a thing that I always wanted to drive a different way home, as it was more fun and experience. On this night, I wish I hadn't. Driving through small, quieter roads, surrounded by trees and no houses for miles, I came across a couple of hitchhikers in the road. They ran out in front of me, so I had to stop. One of them quickly rushed over to the window, asking if I would give them a lift, as they wanted to get home for Christmas. I said no. I felt bad, really bad. But I have heard many hitchhiker stories, and I was not about to let this potentially be another one. I edged forward, but the other man stood at my bonnet, refusing to move. Things got heated quite quickly when I told him to move when I said I had to get home. I even gave them directions to the nearest main road, but nothing was swaying them. I edged forward again, but this time a bit more, with the man at the bonnet stumbling a bit. I didn't want to run him over, but I felt trapped. As I was about to tell the guy at the window to back away, I saw him pull out a weapon from behind his back and start smashing my window. I reversed a little and didn't care at this point. I dodged the man as best as I could and sped off down the road. Seconds later, I was hearing gunshots coming past me. I was gazing into my rearview mirror to see a car come out of nowhere and the two men getting into it. Thankfully, I was so far ahead by this point that I quickly made some turns and pulled into someone's drive with my lights turned off. This is where I sat and waited. I'll be honest, I was terrified. If they had made the lucky turns, then I would be trapped. 10 minutes passed, then 20, and then half an hour before I decided it was time to get moving again. I don't know if the house I parked at, the family was home or not, but I stayed without any problems. Now I was left with the choice of going left and the route I originally planned to go on to go home, or go back right the way I came and think they wouldn't be there anymore. With a busted window and beginning to freeze, I took the left and hoped for the best. Every corner made my anxiety rise a little, but taking things slow, I managed to get myself home, where I had more than enough questions to answer about what had happened. Thankfully, I checked the car in the garage, and it was fixed sometime after Christmas. I had a terrifying experience that I never again want to experience. Be safe, and have a happy Christmas. I hated this song, Jingle Bell Rock, by Bobby Helms. Well, that's not strictly true, but you know when the same songs come on all the time at Christmas. I guess this is one of the good ones out of the bunch, but I still wish they played something else on the radio. Thankfully, as I take the last sips of my hot coffee, I knew it was time to be heading home. Currently, I am sat in a diner on the outskirts of a small local town. It wasn't my local town, but I was away on business, and all I could think about was the roads home, back to my family. One thing was for sure, was that it was going to be hell. The weatherman on the radio spoke about how the weather had taken a turn for the worse, and many roads were closed due to the amount of snow falling and them unable to clear the roads. "Would you like another?" the waitress asks, holding the coffee pot in her hand. She looked fed up, similar to how I was feeling as I politely declined, watching as I noticed her look at the clock on the wall, most likely wishing to get home herself. Huffing to myself and staring out the window once more, I was putting my coat back on, noticing the snow falling quite heavily. I said my goodbyes, left a tip, and walked on out, quickly getting back into my car. I was able to pick up a few extra gifts that were in the sale, all covering the back seats, whilst I put the seatbelt on and started the engine. It was around an hour's drive, so wasting no more time, wanting nothing more than to be home for Christmas, I set off. There were hardly any cars in the road. Getting back onto a side road, things became dark, foggy, and I could barely see anything far in front due to the amount of snow falling. When I did see a car, it had either been abandoned on the side of the road, tilted at an angle, then eventually seeing a little skid mark where it was unable to stop, or there was another car driving, but in the opposite direction edging ever so slowly forward, just as I was. So with the radio on, the car taking longer than usual to warm up, and taking every inch of the road carefully, the journey became a mix of boring and terrifying. Around 2 hours into the drive, I had covered just over 15 miles. Yes, things really were that slow. There were times when the car was sliding about, and I couldn't find grip, so I thought it'd be best to take 2 more side streets in the hopes they were faster. Things actually did go rather smoothly here too. Well, that wasn't until I saw something I wish I hadn't. As I drove down this normal looking street, the car ended up sliding towards the curb. Thankfully, there were no cars. When things came to a stop and the snow continued to fall, something caught my eye. I don't know how I did, but I had to look out my window, and what I saw horrified me. I saw someone dressed in a dark clothing hunched down on someone's roof. It was on the second floor, but they hunched down against a white background. I had to look twice to make sure it wasn't something I was just dreaming up. Even with the heating on, I felt a cold shiver. Goosebumps ran over my body as I could feel them stare back at me. I made it look like the car was just unable to move for a bit before I backed it up and carried on down the road. I'm proud, but also thought I was incredibly stupid for what I did next. Finding somewhere to park, I couldn't sit back if something bad was about to happen. Something just didn't feel right, and I of course wanted to check it out before calling the police. I walked all the way back to the same house, and the man was no longer on the roof. But thanks to the snow, I was able to see his footsteps and could see how he had walked towards the side of the house, placed a set of ladders, and got up onto the roof. Whatever was happening, it wasn't right. And being Christmas Eve, I had no idea if there was a family inside. I dialed 911 and told them what I had experienced and what was going on. They said they would be on the way to check it out within a few minutes. I'd like to say I went home at this point, but instead went and looked around the house. I couldn't see much inside, so I made my way around the side of the house. Still not seeing much of anything. Then to the back, where I pressed my head up against the glass to see inside. This is when I saw someone's face pressed up right back at mine. I yelped as I staggered backward, now looking face to face with what I am sure was the same person who was on the roof not so long ago. He looked evil, and I mean evil. I was terrified. I even struggled to move as he looked into each other's eye. As I finally moved my legs, I ran around to the front of the house, literally about to leg it, fearing he was coming after me. I see a police car coming down the street. I ran straight onto the road and told them exactly what just happened. They both got out, and I watched afar as they searched the home, one entering from the back and the other from the front. Everything was quiet till you finally hear a child scream as a gun was heard being shot. Minutes later, the man is in cuffs and had been shot in the arm. He had apparently attempted to use the little girl as a hostage to escape, but failed to get to the correct room before the police took a quick shot and apprehended him, noticing carrying a gun. I managed to get back home safely, albeit a few more hours later. I just went to my kids' room and sat with them whilst they slept. It had terrified me what I experienced, and when the morning came, I spoke with my wife about what had happened. I tell you, be careful and stay safe, but also, Merry Christmas. It was a cold December night on Christmas Eve. My parents always went away and I was left alone. But this time was different. We had all decided as a family to stay together and make it the best Christmas yet. I was happy. Things were going pleasantly as we packed our bags and all had smiles on our faces. I was positive this was the first time that I would be going away, let alone spending it with my family. I mean, I'm sure I spent it with them when I was younger, but ever since then, I wanted to stay home and they never. So I would spend it with my grandparents. Maybe it's a bit dysfunctional family, but somehow it works. We got in the car. I watched as my dad double checked to make sure everything was locked and safe before he slammed the car door shut and put the heaters on so we warmed up. I knew where they stayed. It was a cabin up towards Scotland, a very remote but stunning area of natural beauty. Within a few hours, we had arrived. It was quite late, so we headed on up to bed after carrying all our stuff inside and said our goodnights. I, of course, quickly looked around each room. It's always something different seeing something in person rather than photographs, and this was no exception. I even spotted a covered hot tub outside. That brought a smile to my face alone. As we were all heading up the stairs though, I was the last one to follow up due to me being nosy, when a knock at the door came. We all stopped and looked at my dad, whilst he fixed his eyes on the door. Who the hell could it possibly be? We hadn't expected anyone, and it was terribly late in the middle of nowhere. My dad shoved himself on by and stood by the front door asking who it was. From what I could hear, the man's voice on the other side asked to come in as it was freezing out and he needed some help. Thankfully, the door had a peephole that would show who was on the other side. But every time my dad looked through, nobody was there. He went to go and open the door, when my mum quickly told him not to. My dad refrained and simply told the man he was sorry and he needed to leave, otherwise we would call the police. What came next was quite frightening. It was silent for a few minutes, and then this loud, crazy laughing cackled for some time. I had no idea what was going on, but I could see that even my dad was a little concerned by this. Thankfully, the laughter died off into the distance, as my dad breathed a sigh of relief before he told us to go to bed, saying that he would stay up just in case. But we all didn't think this was a good idea, so we stayed up with him, igniting the fireplace and playing board games, watching movies, and simply enjoying our Christmas Eve as best as we could. Apparently, Santa had visited us early because the gifts were already under the tree. To when morning came though, and I went to go outside to get some fresh air, with my dad standing firmly behind me, I noticed a letter on the door. The writing was scribbly and initially hard to make out, but it read, "You are lucky you didn't open that door. I call myself the Christmas Killer, and I have been watching you for a few years now. You look delicious. Tonight, you got lucky, but who knows for the next." That was it for my dad. Anger drained over his face as he pushed me back inside and told us that we were all going back home. Not sure if this was all some sick joke, or if this person truly was out to kill, but we quickly headed on home. My dad was adamant to never go back to that place again. He also spoke to the owner and told them what had been going on, also sending a copy of the letter. Who knows what became of that man? Maybe he is still lurking around Scotland somewhere, waiting. But what's for sure is that he'll be waiting forever for us to return, as we will never be going back again.